Hey, I'm Kev Kiermasko and welcome to Power Oversteer. And in today's episode, we're going to look back at a very interesting month of April for the IndyCar Series, as there was a, at times, chaotic but very entertaining Grand Prix of Long Beach held in the California sun in the middle of the month. And then last weekend, we had a very damp and wet Grand Prix of Alabama held at the Barber Motorsports Park, but it was still a very interesting race. And then we're going to look ahead to the biggest month on the calendar, one of the biggest months in motorsports, with the month of May held at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That's why I'm looking a bit more dashing than usual. I put a jacket on for once. But we're going to look ahead to the inaugural Grand Prix of Indianapolis, held on a kind of slightly modified Indianapolis road course, and in the 98th edition of the Indianapolis 500, the biggest and greatest spectacle in racing, and a very interesting grid for that one as well. So let's get right into it. Let's look back at April, and let's look back at the 40th edition of the Grand Prix of Long Beach. The Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach was the second round on the calendar, held in very sunny conditions in mid-April. And after Penske and Will Power kind of had their own race in the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg, we were kind of maybe expecting them to be very strong once again on the streets of California. But in qualifying, it was a different case altogether, as it was Ryan Hunter-Reay, the 2012 champion, who got pole for Andretti Autosport, and his teammate James Hinchcliffe joined him on the front row. In third, it was Sebastian Bourdais for KVSH Racing, with the Frenchman showing that he has still got it, and the four-time Champ Car champ looking forward to battling at the front for once maybe. Then in fourth was Joseph Newgarden for Sarah Fisher Hartman Racing, the young American really stepping up this year and having a great start to the season, with Jack Hawksworth, talking about young chaps stepping up, the English rookie with Brian Herto Autosport in the top 5 and showing that he does like these street courses. Alongside him was Simon Pagenaud for Sam Smith Motorsports, and the Frenchman is always going to be contender, it seems, so far this season. In 7th behind him was the reigning champ Scott Dixon, with Marco Andretti alongside him, completing a very good qualifying for Andretti Autosport. And then in the 5th row was Helio Castroneves for Penske, the highest Penske as well, so quite a poor qualifying for them. And rounding out the top 10 was Justin Wilson for Dale Coyne Racing. And at the start, it was Ryan Hunter-Reay getting the jump on everyone with these single file restarts that we now have on the road and street courses, and he led the opening 26, so that's before the first round of pit stops. He was ahead of his teammate James Hinchcliffe. He had Joseph Newgarden still right up there as well. Sebastian Bourdais was starting to drop back a bit, was still in the top 10 though, and we saw the likes of Juan Pablo Montoya fight his way through the field and providing some great racing in the early portion of the race. Scott Dixon once again proving that he's good with his fuel economy, leading a couple of laps while everyone went through their pit stop cycle. And then Ryan Hunter-Reay found himself in the lead again for the next 25 laps, from lap 29 to lap 53. And in that first round of starts, we saw our first victim of the race, and which caused our first caution of the race. On lap 27, Sebastian Bourdais had rejoined just in front of James Hinchcliffe, but on cold tyres and maybe with a bit of a braking problem as well. He just went into the tyres into turn 8, and that brought out the safety car. But after that, as I said, Ryan Hunter-Reay still led from James Hinchcliffe, and it was kind of an Andretti fight at the front. But Joseph Newgarden was still right up there for Sarah Fisher Hartman Racing. And so on lap 54, he stayed out a lap longer than the rest of the front runners, and he got himself into the lead when he came out of the pits. Meanwhile, Bourdais was still having a terrible race for KVSH Racing. After getting fished out of the tyres, he went into them again on lap 41, bringing out the second caution of the race into turn 10. But as I said, Newgarden, he came out of the pit stops, the last round of pit stops, in the lead, ahead of Ryan Hunter-Reay and James Hinchcliffe as well, with Will Power also in contention. But it was kind of impatience, I would say, from Ryan Hunter-Reay, who kind of made a move into turn 4 which wasn't on the books even, and he got his nose chopped off, of course, in a place where I don't think anyone has really made a successful move there. If he just waited a couple of corners, he would have had a good opportunity to pass Newgarden, who was still on very cold tyres. Remember, no tyre warmers in the IndyCar Series. And so Ryan Hunter-Reay, Joseph Newgarden, James Hinchcliffe, they were all collected up into this crash into turn 4. But unfortunately, the corner was kind of blocked off a bit, but Will Power made his way through, so did Juan Pablo Montoya, due to some nice evasive manoeuvres. But the likes of Helio Castroneves, Tony Kanaan, Takuma Sato and Jack Hawksworth, unfortunately for the Briton, caught up in an instant for the second race in a row. But a few of them did get going again, such as Castroneves and Hawksworth. And at the front, we had Sebastian Saavedra. Yeah, he had stayed out a bit longer than the rest, and the KVSH racing driver was enjoying his time at the front. But after he pitted, it was Scott Dixon in the lead, and it was all about whether the Chip Ganassi driver could make it to the end after he had pitted just slightly earlier in the race after dropping back. But unfortunately for the Kiwi, the reigning champ couldn't quite make it to the end, so he pitted with a few laps remaining, and Mike Conway, who had fought his way up from 17th position on the grid in his Ed Carpenter racing car, came through to grab his third IndyCar Series victory and the second IndyCar Series victory for the Ed Carpenter racing team, and their first on a road or street course. And so the gamble for Ed Carpenter to step back from the road and street courses and put a proven road racer in Mike Conway in that seat on the road and street portion of the Canada had already paid off. The Englishman, after winning at Long Beach his debut IndyCar win in 2011 with Andretti Autosport, he seems he likes the street courses. He also won at Belle Isle in Detroit in the first race there last year for Dale Coyne Racing. He finished ahead of Will Power, who had started 14th but had worked his way up the order, and of course with that late crash between most of the contenders for the victory, it kind of played into his hands. He finished ahead of Carlos Munoz, the rookie for Andretti Autosport, an impressive run from the Colombian, who was holding off the advances of his compatriot Juan Pablo Montoya for the most part of the race. But for Montoya, who is still getting to grips with IndyCar and open wheel races once again after many years away in NASCAR, a 4th place finish was very good for him after starting 16th. Simon Pagenaud rounding out the top 5 for Sam Spit Motorsports ahead of his teammate Mikhail Leishkin, the Russian rookie, showing once again how good he is and being top rookie, or second top rookie finisher in this race. Oyo Serbia for Rahal Letterman got 7th, and it's a rare bright spark for the Rahal Letterman team, who are having a dreadful start to the season, ahead of Marco Andretti in 8th, who started 8th. And then we have Sebastian Saavedra, as I said, who led that few laps and worked his way into the top 10. And so did his fellow Colombian Carlos Hertos, the rookie for Dale Coyne Racing, who just had no preseason testing, got dumped in the seat just a few days before St. Petersburg and survived the chaos at Long Beach to get a great top 10. And all 4 Colombians had finished in the top 10. That is pretty interesting to see. And so Long Beach was a very entertaining race. I said that chaos a bit there from the kind of impatience from Ryan Hunter-Reay there, but for the most part it was a very entertaining race. You saw lots of great passing, and overall I would say it's a great event for the IndyCar Series. And so from Long Beach we went to the first road course meeting and the Barber Motorsports Park for the Grand Prix of Alabama. The Honda Indy Grand Prix of Alabama, held at the Barber Motorsports Park, was round 3 of the championship last weekend. And in qualifying it was pretty straightforward. It was Penske and Power on pole at a place where they've done very well in the past. Alongside him was again James Hinchcliffe on the front row for Andretti Autosport, looking to finally kickstart his season after a couple of very unfortunate races for him. In third it was Ryan Hunter-Reay looking to make up for his mistake in Long Beach and become a hero in Alabama for Andretti Autosport. And in 4th place, once again in qualifying, was Joseph Newgarden for Sarah Fisher Hartman Racing, the young American showing some great pace in the early part of this season. In 5th, it was the reigning champ Scott Dixon with his title rival from 2013 alongside him on row 3, Helio Castroneves for Penske. And in row 4 was an all-Colombian affair as Carlos Munoz, fresh off his podium in Long Beach, was again ahead of the guy he was battling in Long Beach, and his hero as well, his compatriot Juan Pablo Montoya for Penske. Marco Andretti was once again in the top 10 for Andretti Autosport in 9th, with Simon Pagenaud rounding out the top 10 for Smith Peterson Hamilton Motorsports. And there was a surprise at the back. Tony Kanaan started last for Chip Ganassi Racing after not being able to take part in qualifying. And so the race, it was delayed by almost an hour due to the wet conditions, as the track had to be dried out, and the drainage is a bit difficult at Barber due to the undulations. The rivers form along the track quite easy in certain parts of the circuit. And so once they started to dry out a bit, we saw the drivers go to racing in a timed race. It was around an hour and 40 minutes long was the distance, or 69 laps in the end. And it was Power who was leading the way at the front, with his Penske maybe set up too much towards the wet conditions in the end, but in the early part of the race he was up to a second a lap faster than anyone else in the field. He was just running away with it. Further back we saw his teammate Juan Pablo Montoya make some daring moves on the first few laps, as drivers were having a variety of setups, it seems, and the drivers are having a variety of problems, it seems, keep holding on to the car onto the track. It was great to see from the onboards, maybe not for the drivers though. And unfortunately we saw our first victim on the first lap, Takuma Sato for AJ Foyt. He was kind of having a poor start to the campaign, kind of the total opposite to last season for him. He spun in turn 11 where a number of drivers had almost spun already before him, and unfortunately that brought out the first caution of the race, but it was over quickly, and as I said, Power was getting away at the front. That wasn't until lap 15 when the Penske driver made a mistake into turn 5, just locked up and was lucky not to go across the grass and into a barrier. He just about avoided it, but it meant Ryan Hunter-Reay took the lead for Andretti Autosport and would lead until the first caution of the race on lap 21. Unfortunately, there was contact between Sebastian Bourdais and Mikhail Ereshkin. The Russian rookie was holding off the French veteran for a number of laps, and despite all the moves that Bourdais tried, he could not get past the Russian. And into turn 5 in the hairpin, he just gave him a little nudge into the corner. Unfortunately, that spun the Russian round and got Bourdais a drive-through penalty. Also getting a penalty was Helio Castroneves, because during these round of pit stops, he stopped in the wrong pit box. He stopped in Justin Wilson's pit box, which was just before his. But I could understand the confusion when we looked at the TV pictures, because the pit crews had identical uniforms. Maybe something to look out for in the future and not get identical uniform teams together again. Remember Helmi Alguersuari at Abu Dhabi in 2009? He did a similar thing, thinking that the Red Bull crew were his Toro Rosso crew. But back to this race, and we had an interesting leader after the first caution, and second caution after it went to the green. Sebastian Saveja for KVS H Racing had decided to stay out on his wet tyres, gamble a bit, while everyone else went onto dry tyres. And he did lead the next 10 laps as we went through a bit of a caution period. We saw Juan Pablo Montoya bring out the third caution of the race, unfortunately on lap 27, when he spun in that treacherous turn 11 corner. And then a couple of laps later we saw another Colombian spin, this time Carlos Herta's spin out of turn 6, just getting away on the grass and going into the barriers. We also saw another Colombian spin, Carlos Munoz, the rookie for Andretti Autosport, who had ruined a great start to the race and a great qualifying by spinning under caution, and unfortunately that was the end of his race. In the end it seems like it was a mechanical problem for him. And so once it finally got going, this race, after all these cautions, after all the ad breaks as well, great to watch on TV of course, we had Ryan Hunter-Reay take the lead on that 34, and he was lead the next 15 laps of the race until we had the next round of pit stops. And it was some great fighting through the field as the track dried up, and we saw some of the drivers who perhaps had the setup more inclined to the dry start to make their way through the field. James Hinchcliffe, for instance, who had quite a poor start and dropped back, he was starting to make his way back towards the front. We also saw Joseph Newgarden as well. But most significantly, we saw Marco Andretti for Andretti Autosport just charge through the field like everyone else was in reverse. He made his way up to second and was the only guy really to challenge Ryan Hunter-Reay for the rest of the race. Even ahead of that on that 49 when he stayed out. We also saw the likes of Scott Dixon and Justin Wilson stay out longer as well, hoping to get shorter last stints and less fuel in the car, fresher tyres to make their charge through the field. But it was Ryan Hunter-Reay who would lead the rest of the way from lap 52 till the end on lap 69, as he was just dominated in his DHL Andretti Autosport Honda and grabbed his first victory of the season and grabbed his second victory at the Barber Motorsports Park after winning last season. He definitely had gone from zero to hero that weekend. Behind him was Marco Andretti, a great result for the American and a much needed result as well to get him up in the championship order and start to maybe challenge for the title, get his championship title challenge even going, just like last season. Perhaps he needs to have a few wins though to really be challenging for the title this season. Behind him was the reigning champ Scott Dixon, another quiet race, and he got better as the dry conditions came, and he's proven to be very good this season without being noticed much. It's a typical Dixon season so far. And behind him was another guy not getting noticed much, Simon Pagenaud, who started 10th but made some nice moves in the last part of the race to get up to 4th place, ahead of Will Power, who, as I said, maybe had a setup that was too wet and just dropped back a bit in the last half of the race. Justin Wilson got his way up to 6th place after starting in 16th. If the Briton can just qualify, well, he would be right up there. But he's having to fight his way through the field, but he's still getting some great finishing positions though. James Hinchcliffe was behind him in 7th, making up for that poor start by getting a top 10 and finally kick-starting his season ahead of Joseph Newgarden, and again another driver finally getting a good result there. And Tony Kanaan as well from the back, 23rd up to 9th. Brilliant race for the Chip Ganassi driver, and he's showing that he's adapting to the team quite well, it seems. And then behind him was Charlie Kimball and another Chip Ganassi car in 10th, with Ryan Briscoe in 11th, rounding up a Chip Ganassi conga line over the line behind his teammate. Jack Hawksworth in 12th was the top rookie finisher, as it proved a very difficult race for the rookies, a very difficult weekend as well, with of course Munoz crashing out and Mikhail Leshkin bringing out the caution on lap 66, so the race ended under caution after he crashed in turn 14, just getting quite heavy into the tyre barriers unfortunately. We also saw the likes of Ron Pablo Montoya finish 21st after his spin, and Hugo Serbia finished down there in 20th, and Helio Castroneves as well after his penalty, finishing in 19th. And so it wasn't a classic Barber Motorsports Park race, it wasn't a classic Grand Prix of Alabama that we've seen in the last couple of seasons with this new DW12, well, not new anymore. But it was still a very good race, and it was always great to see drivers battling the conditions and their cars in the wet, which we saw in the opening few laps. And then it was interesting seeing how the race played out with the element of a drying track, and maybe drivers and teams went for different setups, and it definitely showed itself in the end with the results there. So that was the first 3 rounds of the championship before this month of May, and going into the month of May the championship looked like this. Will Power is leading the Verizon IndyCar Series after his win in St. Petersburg and a couple of podiums as well in the first 2 races of the season, as well as getting that top 5 at the Barber Motorsports Park. He has 125 points, 18 points ahead of the winner at Barber, Ryan Hunter-Reay. It really was his month, being the hero in Barber after being quite a zero at Long Beach. And then we had Simon Pagenaud in 3rd, the Frenchman being very consistent, not getting a podium but always finishing in the top 5, ahead of Scott Dixon, who's quietly going about his business again in 4th for Chip Ganassi. And in 5th is Mike Conway, who's only running the road and street courses, remember, but is really repaying the faith that Ed Compter is given to him this season. Marco Andretti is 6th, jumping up a lot after that podium finish at Barber, ahead of Justin Wilson for Dale Coyne Racing. As I said, if he just gets his qualifying together, he's one of the worst qualifiers in the field. He could really be challenging up there for wins and podiums at these road and street courses. It was a problem last year, unfortunately, for him, and it seems to be another problem for him this season, or for Dale Coyne in particular, this qualifying pace. Helio Castroneves is in 8th for Penske, and Tony Kanaan in 9th behind his fellow Brazilian, with a young American, Joseph Newgarden, rounding out the top 10 for Sarah Fisher-Hartman Racing, with Pablo Montoya and Carlos Munoz, and Sebastian Saavedra right behind him in a Colombian conga line in the middle of the standings. And Mikhail Aleshkin is in 14th, just a point behind Munoz in the battle for top rookie so far this season. And near the back we see Rahal Letterman Langan drivers Oyo Serbia, who has done one less race than everyone else, remember. Charlie Kimball for Chip Ganassi, not the start of the season he would have wanted after a very good 2013 season. And Jack Hawksworth, who has shown some pace but has just been in the wrong place at the wrong time on a couple of occasions this season. And Graham Rahal in 20th. Where's it gone wrong for him after winning in IndyCar and being very fast in the early part of his IndyCar career? It's just seemed to have dropped off in the last couple of years for Rahal. And James Hinchcliffe is down there in 19th in the standings, and he would be looking to get some more results to jump up there after proving to be very inconsistent again in the first part of the season. He really needs to sort that out. And so that is the standings for the Rising IndyCar Series going into the month of May, and let's look ahead to it by previewing the inaugural Grand Prix of Indianapolis. And the Grand Prix of Indianapolis is part of the month of May, and it's already got underway the month of May. On Tuesday there were the refresher tests for Kurt Busch and Jack Villeneuve. Kurt Busch did the rookie orientation program last year but didn't race in the Indy 500, and he's normally a NASCAR Sprint Cup driver, so he did a refresher test with Jack Villeneuve, who is returning to the Indy 500 for the first time in 19 years, the biggest gap between an attempt at the Indy 500, and he's never driven an IndyCar since that 95 event, so he did the refresher test as well and posted a 217 mile per hour lap time compared to Kurt Busch's 220 mile per hour that time. So there have done their refresher test, and then on the next day there was the road course open test on Wednesday, which allowed the teams and drivers to test the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course for the inaugural Grand Prix of Indianapolis. And then on Monday there is the rookie orientation program for the likes of Jack Hawksworth and Mikhail Aleshkin, so they can get into the 500 and, you know, do practice and everything. And then on Thursday next week we've got the Grand Prix practice, Friday the Grand Prix qualifying, then on Saturday the Grand Prix of Indianapolis, the inaugural Grand Prix of Indianapolis, held on a slightly modified Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course compared to the road course that F1 ran from 2000 to 2007 and MotoGP has ran in recent years and will run this year. And the Grand Prix of Indianapolis came about after the Human and Co, a parent company of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, hired Boston Consulting Group to evaluate its business operations. And in the report that this consulting group produced, one of the suggestions was to explore the possibility of hosting a road course event for the IndyCar Series. And so last September the IndyCar, they did a feasibility test on the road course, and then the inaugural race was announced on the 1st of October last year and was scheduled for early May, and it's going to be on Saturday the 10th of May, just over a week's time. And so shortly after that test, construction began on reconfiguring the road course to make it more IndyCar friendly, you know, more competitive, you know, better for the fans. And so the course has got a few modifications compared to the course that the F1 ran, because the IndyCars will run the same way that the F1 ran in the thousands. And so turn 1 is now a 90-degree turn and has moved a bit further north compared to when F1 ran. And then the road course portion inside the oval, turn 4, it's removed those 2 slow turns which were at the end of the first sector for F1. It's now just effectively a fast kink onto the back straight, the Holman Boulevard back straight. And then at the end of that back straight now, there's a new 90-degree left-hand turn, which leads to a faster set of turns in the infield. You remember in F1 they had those terrible 2 slow corners, and it was, it's quite ugly watching the F1 cars just go through there, because F1 cars aren't meant to go through corners that slow really. But for IndyCar, much faster turns inside that road course, and for MotoGP it was a bit faster, but not as fast as the IndyCar section, snake in the middle now. And rather than the original turn 13 that F1 ran in the US Grand Prix, IndyCar is going to mimic the motorcycle course, where the motorcycle course has a bit of a chicane at the beginning of its lap, running in the oval direction. Well, IndyCar is going to run in the opposite direction and have this at the end of the lap. It's going to return the 2 sharp corners at the end of this kind of section for MotoGP. It's just going to be replaced by a single 90-degree right hand turn. And so that is the Grand Prix of Indianapolis road course for this inaugural event. It's going to run 82 laps, going to have a duration of 199.998 miles, and the course is now 2.4 miles long, or 3.9 kilometers long. So that is the Grand Prix of Indianapolis, held on Saturday the 10th of May. And immediately after that event, practice begins for the big one, the 98th Indianapolis 500 practice on Sunday 11th until Friday the 16th. And on Saturday the 17th there are the time trials, and as well on Sunday, and then practice on Monday the 19th, and then community day on Wednesday the 21st, and Indy Lights gets going on their qualifying day on Thursday the 22nd, and then it's Carb Day and the Freedom 100 on Friday the 23rd of May. Then on Saturday the 24th of May it's the Legends Day and Parade, and then Sunday the 25th it's the big one, the Indianapolis 500, with Memorial Day on the Monday following the event. And this schedule is a bit different from last year, of course, with the addition of the Grand Prix of Indianapolis, and there's been more differences made as well. There is a more shortened qualifying, or more simplified qualifying effort, due to there not just being enough runners for there being kind of a bump day event, where you got 32 runners at the moment, or I believe it's almost up to 33 as well, with Pip Amman recently being added to the Del Coyne team. And so with no bump day scenario really, you're going to have just a normal qualifying basically, or kind of a streamlined qualifying on the Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday the 17th of May, the first day of this, all cars will be entered to make an attempt to qualify, and then the fastest 33 cars will be locked into the starting field, which seems like everyone will be locked into the starting field then, but the actual grid position will not be assigned on the Saturday. Saturday just decides who's going to be into the Fast 9 shootout, which the Fast 9 will be attempting to get pole for the Indianapolis 500, and that will be on Sunday, with cars that posted times from the 10th position downwards to 33rd. They will attempt to qualify from 10:15 AM on Sunday the 18th of May, and all the Saturday times will be erased, and the Sunday times will determine the starting lineup. And then from 2 PM Sunday, the top 9 cars from Saturday will participate in the Fast 9 shootout, and that will determine pole as well as the starting positions from 2nd to 9th position. All the engines will of course be twin turbos, as Honda and Chevrolet have all gone over to them, as single turbo power plants are no longer permitted, and grid penalties of course have been changed for engine changes. Before you had a grid penalty, now the manufacturers get points penalties for that. And of course this Indy 500 is going to be the first of the double points races for the 500 milers, with Pocono 500 and the MAV TV or MAV TV 500 at Fontana, the season finale as well, being 500 mile races. They will also be double points races, and all 3 races of course count for the Triple Crown as well. So lots to play for in Indianapolis 500, apart from immortality, as well as being on that trophy. But let's talk about the field then. So the field consists of, well, it's perhaps one of the most interesting fields for a number of years. You have Jack Villeneuve, as I said, returning to the 500 for the first time in 19 years since winning it in 1995. He's driving for Sam Smith Motorsports. Last year, Buddy Lazier drove for his own team, and he will return to the 500 with Lazier Partners Racing. And Kurt Busch will be driving for the Andretti Autosport team after, I said, doing rookie orientation program last year but couldn't get a ride for the 2013 Indy 500. Well, he's got one with one of the best teams on the grid as well, and he's going to be attempting to do the double with IndyCar and Charlotte, where they have the Coca-Cola 600, and he's the first driver to do this since Robbie Gordon in 2004, and he's the first NASCAR champion to start in the Indy 500, as other NASCAR champions such as Bobby Allison, Tony Stewart, Cal Yarborough in the past weren't yet NASCAR champions. So yeah, it's very interesting to see this kind of mixture in the field. Has also, this is the first Indy 500 to feature at least one champion from Formula 1, IndyCar and NASCAR. That's quite a spread, isn't it? And the pace cars will be driven by three-time Indy 500 winner and four-time IndyCar champion even Dario Franchitti, who of course retired at the end of last year after that horrific crash in Houston. So that is the field for the Indy 500. There are more kind of one-off drivers. Sage Curran, who won the Indy Lights title last year, beating Carlos Munoz to it. He's with Chip Ganassi in another car, and he's part of the Chip Ganassi Young Driver Development Program, along with Kyle Larson in the Sprint Cup Series in NASCAR, and someone in the Nationwide Series who I can't pronounce the name, but I know his first name is Dylan. And you also have Pipperman, as I said, in the Dale Coyne car, alongside Justin Wilson, as Carlos Hurtus, the Colombian rookie, will not be driving on the ovals this season. And also there's going to be J.R. Hildebrand at Ed Carpenter Racing. There's no Mike Conway, of course. Ed Carpenter steps back into that car and has to be one of the favourites for the 500, of course winning pole last year and running very well. But I have to say, my favourites for the 500, well, we haven't had an oval race this season, which makes it a bit harder to guess than normal, and the 500 doesn't traditionally now have an oval race before the 500 in the last few years. You know, before you had maybe kind of a race in late April which you could, you know, get, which showed who was good on the ovals maybe, and then for the 500 it was a bit clearer to guess. But in recent years that hasn't been the case, and I'm not really sure who's gonna be right up there, apart from maybe Ed Carpenter, because he's one of the few only oval specialists in the field. I've got to, of course, go for Andretti Autosport, and I might be going for Ryan Hunter-Reay to get there. He's definitely had the pace this year, and James Hinchcliffe has also had the pace as well. So I think I've got to go for both of those. I'm going to go for Andretti Autosport, I think, and for James Hinchcliffe or Ryan Hunter-Reay to win it. And apart from the Andretti guys, you of course have got to look out for Penske and Will Power, who's now good on the ovals, and of course got that breakthrough win at Fontana in the season finale last season. Juan Pablo Montoya returning to the 500 for the first time since he won it back in 2000 with Chip Ganassi. And Helio Castroneves, he's won it 3 times. Can he make it 4? Join the legends of AJ Foyt and Rick Mears up there. So, you know, you've got quite a lot to choose from for the winners, but as I said, I'm going for Andretti Autosport. I'm going for James Hinchcliffe or Ryan Hunter-Reay. Also look out for Carlos Munoz as well from that team, who came second in his rookie IndyCar race last year, and he was like a lap away. If it didn't go there though, on that lap, he would have passed Tony Kanaan and probably wouldn't have won the Indy 500. And then maybe Justin Wilson as well for Dale Coyne. He's got much better on the ovals. He's actually quite good on the ovals as well as the road and street courses, but nowhere near the level he is on road and street courses. He isn't quite like a Will Power would say now. And then you've also got Chip Ganassi, of course, with Scott Dixon, who's quite handy at the 500. He's won it back in 2008. Tony Kanaan, the reigning champion, of course, in the Indy 500. Ryan Briscoe, who always does well on ovals, and then you got the one-offs like Townsend Bell as well, who is always very good, even though this is the only race of the year in the IndyCar. And so yeah, that, you know, quite a lot to choose from there for the winners. But before I ramble on and name everyone in the field, I'll just link you down below, and I hope you have enjoyed this Power Oversteer. Let me know who you think could win the Indy 500 and the inaugural Grand Prix of Indianapolis. I forgot Martin Plowman as well, as I'm a Brit. I've got to mention him. He's driving for AJ Foyt, I believe. He's doing the Grand Prix of Indianapolis and Indy 500, and he was the LMP2 WEC champion as well last year. And Frank Monteghi, a late call-up. He's going to be driving the car that Kurt Busch will be in the Indy 500, but he's going to be driving it in the Grand Prix of Indianapolis. And the former Super Aguri driver back in 2006 and Renault test driver in F1, and former Peugeot driver as well. I looked up, he didn't drive last year, so this could be a very interesting return to a race car, but they say you never lose it, you know, it's just doing it consistently, I think they say. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does in his first driving in IndyCar for many years as well for Frank Monteghi. So yeah, as I said before I ramble on, that's going to be my winners, I believe, for the Indy 500, my choice. As I said, let me know what you think. And for the Grand Prix of Indianapolis, I'm going to go for Mike Conway. Why not? I think it could be a very good month for IndyCar Motor racing, and once again a very good month for IndyCar Motor racing. So as I said, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. I'll be back at the end of the month or early June for, of course, a review of the month of May, and then a preview of a very busy June month for the IndyCar Series. But till then, cheerio.